College towns really are some of the best places to live. And today I'm going to tell you what makes them great, how I came up with an index to rate all of America's college towns, and we're going to count down the top 10 and some honorable and dishonorable mentions, and it's all coming up next. This is CityNerd, weekly content on cities and transportation. Viewer-suggested topics always welcome, but sometimes I just do whatever floats my boat, and this is that kind of week. So first, let's talk about what makes college towns great. They're places where there's a high concentration of well-educated folks, and that means college towns usually punch well above their weight on things like politics, culture, food, etc. But also, most college towns are places that really prioritize walking, biking, and transit over driving. If you're a college student, pretty much all your daily activities are going to be within walking or biking distance. You probably don't own a car, and college towns tend to reflect those realities. They're places where it's very normal to walk and bike, and the infrastructure often supports that. Okay, let's talk about what I did here, because if you're new to the channel, I don't really go on vibes. I pretty much always rely on data to create these top 10 lists. First, let's define the term college town. I'm saying a college town is a city where the university enrollment is over 25% of the population. I mean, there's a sense in which Austin, Texas is a college town, but even a large state university isn't really dominant when we're talking about a city as big as Austin. And also, I already did a video on the best urban college campuses. Also, for this list, it has to be a city that stands on its own. I'm not looking at suburbs, so like Cambridge, Massachusetts and Berkeley, California do really well in the scoring system that I'm going to talk about in a minute, but those cities are really inextricable from larger metropolitan areas. So here are the things I looked at for evaluating each college town. I want a pedestrian-friendly city, so I combined data from WalkScore, which evaluates walkability, and the US Census, which tells you what percentage of people actually walk, which I think is telling. I did the same for bikes, so that gets me my own walk and bike rating for each city. And for transit, I went with census mode share data only. The other thing I looked at is density, which gets you kind of a proxy for how city-like a college town is going to feel. And I gave a bonus for cities that have intercity rail, since being able to access other larger cities is, I think, still pretty important. I didn't give any points for being like a good party school or having a competitive football team, so this is going to be kind of tough on certain kinds of college towns. You are going to find that I've talked about a couple of these places in earlier videos that focused on small cities, but a lot of these are new, and I think this is going to be a fun one to guess along with. Okay, enough setup, let's get into it. Number 10 is San Luis Obispo, California, home of Cal Poly SLO. What I'm going to do for just about all of these is show you some choice street views while I talk about the things that really make the city stand out. For San Luis Obispo, it's kind of an exaggerated version of a lot of the things that drive a certain kind of person crazy about California. Like in 1990, it became the first municipality in the world, apparently, to ban smoking in all public buildings, including bars and restaurants. Checkmate, Europe. Also, in 1982, one of the first cities to adopt an ordinance banning drive-through businesses. This is probably a good time to point out that I did not include affordability as a criterion, so do some research before you make relocation plans. Also, 5 trips a day on the Pacific Surfliner into LA Union Station. Well, until the alignment falls into the Pacific Ocean anyway. Number 9, Corvallis, home of Oregon State University. It's really biking that puts Corvallis on this list. It's consistently one of the top 3 bike cities in the US by mode share, and the other 2 that tend to rank are further up this list. It is a little puzzling because the bike infrastructure isn't exactly world class. Kind of goes to show how important culture and habit are for transportation choices. Transit, the city runs the bus service, and in 2011, council approved a surcharge on monthly water utility bills to fund the system, making it fareless, which it's been ever since. I swear I'm going to do a video on all the weird different ways cities fund transit at some point, because it is just fascinating. Partial credit for intercity rail. Corvallis doesn't have an Amtrak stop, but you can get the Cascades if you go into Albany, which is like 10 miles east. Number 8 is Charlottesville, home of the University of Virginia. There's a whole commercial corridor connecting the university campus into downtown, including Charlottesville's Amtrak station, which is actually nicely situated on the national network. Trains to the Midwest and the South, and about 2.5 hours on the Northeast Regional into DC Union Station. Also, one of the longest pedestrianized streets in the country on Main Street downtown, which kind of infamously became ground zero in the culture war over removing symbols of racist losers from prominent places in US cities. The places we're looking at on this list are almost always pretty politically active. Number 7 is Ann Arbor, home of the University of Michigan. Never mind that Michigan Stadium is the largest team sports venue in the US. The size of the campus itself is really wild. It touches downtown and kind of leapfrogs to the northeast. The city has a variety of main streets, like literally Main Street, and central Ann Arbor is charming as all get out. And even though it is its own separate metropolitan statistical area, it is part of the Detroit Combined Statistical Area, and you can take the Amtrak Wolverine into the city in about an hour, 3 trains a day. So Ann Arbor is kind of giving you the best of all worlds. Number 6 is Boulder, home of the University of Colorado. There's actually a lot to say about Boulder. It practically needs its own video. The city has done a lot of well-intentioned things around historic preservation and protecting Flatiron Mountain View corridors that have the unintended, or maybe intended, consequence of turbocharging housing prices. There is tons of employment in Boulder, and a lot of the people who work there can't afford to live there, so there's a lot of commuting from outlying areas, including Denver, which is 20-odd miles away. There is a bus rapid transit route connecting the two cities, the Flatiron Flyer, and there is a plan for a regional rail connection, but the current anticipated opening date is like 2044, I think. Ugh. But it is the biking that really pushes Boulder up this list. There's a great path system, bike score of 86 with a 9% mode share, and like some other cities on this list, it's got a pedestrianized street downtown, Pearl Street. And I did contemplate giving bonus points for having the world's finest restaurant in a prime location, but don't worry, I came to my senses. Number 5 is Amherst, home of the University of Massachusetts and a couple other colleges. This is a pretty small city, but it has a census walk mode share over 20% and a transit mode share over 10%, and those are big city numbers. Also, I did give Amherst half credit for intercity rail, since you can go into Northampton and get the Vermonter or the Valley Flyer, and you can go into Springfield and get several other trains. So the connection to the Northeast Corridor is okay. This one ends up being a little tricky because Amherst is included in the Springfield Metropolitan Statistical Area, but just eyeballing it, it's really disconnected by agricultural land and like mountains, and it's about the same distance from Springfield as Boulder is from Denver, so I made an executive decision to include it. Likewise, my number 4, Davis, California, home of UC Davis. It's included in the Sacramento metro area, but there are miles of rural land between the two cities, so Davis fits the definition of what I wanted on this list. Another way you know whether a place is a college town or not is when the university employs 10 times as many people as the next 9 employers combined. The walkability in Davis is fine, the transit use is okay, but Davis does actually dominate this list when it comes to bikes, leaving Boulder, Corvallis, and every other city in the dust. Bike score rating of 90 and a 10.6% bike mode share, both the best on this list. This is really another one that warrants its own video, because the history and the politics behind why Davis embraced biking as a legitimate transportation mode back in the 1960s is just fascinating and probably instructive. And Davis is well located. The intercity connections are really good. The Capital Corridor runs 12 trains a day that'll get you to Sacramento in like 25 minutes, or Oakland in 90 minutes. And the Coast Starlight and the California Zephyr will take you longer distances if you need it. Okay, top 3 on the way, so get your guesses ready, and honorable and dishonorable mentions are on the way too. But first, brief reminder to click all this stuff. I'm told the notification bell actually is important. I don't know. Lots of ways to connect. Honestly, I probably spend too much time on the apps, but that's a personal problem. And of course, the direct support on Patreon really does help keep me doing this full time. Honorable mentions. I already mentioned college towns like Berkeley and Cambridge that are really integrated into much larger metro areas. I'd also include New Brunswick, home of the Rutgers main campus, and honestly, probably a couple other New Jersey towns as well. Two other interesting cases that could have made this list, but I just couldn't separate them from larger metro areas. East Lansing, home of Michigan State, and West Lafayette, Indiana, home of Purdue University. Still great places to go to school and to live, I imagine, but maybe I need to do a whole other video on college town suburbs. I've got one dishonorable mention, but first, let's hop overseas and recognize that Oxford, England is maybe the ultimate college town, to the point where it became the epicenter of recent 15-minute city conspiracy nonsense. I mean, the whole point of a college town is that you can actually walk everywhere. And the university is like 1,000 years old. I don't think any of this is a new invention of like the Illuminati or whatever. What might be a conspiracy though is managing to design a college town with a walk score of 22, the worst one I found, and that is Oxford, Mississippi, which, in an act of massive hubris, was named for the city in England. It's home of the University of Mississippi, and I actually don't want to spend a bunch of time dunking on that poor state, but when your school mascot is a white plantation owner, the dunks just kind of write themselves. Okay, back to the list. Number 3 is Burlington, home of the University of Vermont. Look, Vermont is a vibe, and it's not going to be for everyone. Mainstream socialist politics, hippie ice cream purveyors, odious jam bands. But you can't deny this is a very cool small city. And again, great pedestrianized street downtown, Church Street Marketplace. Highly disappointing, actually, that there's no street view here, so I'm just piecing together what I can. Burlington is small, so access to larger cities is important, and you do get the Ethan Allen Express down to New York City, and there's no train for this other one, but you're like 75 miles from Montreal. That is pretty sweet. Number 2 is Ithaca, home of Cornell University in upstate New York. Highest walk mode share I found, 29%, and the highest transit mode share at 12%. Very compact and walkable, and State Street downtown, you guessed it, also has a pedestrianized segment. On the flip side, there's no passenger rail at all. There used to be, just like there used to be everywhere in the US. But now the rail station is just a bank branch. The passenger rail bonus still wouldn't have gotten Ithaca to number 1 though, because my number 1 city isn't the best at any single thing like Ithaca or Davis. It's just very good on all measures, and it's State College, home of Pennsylvania State University. Here are some numbers. At almost 9,000 people per square mile, it has a higher population density than Seattle. I mean, it's not Hoboken level density, but this is a self-contained remote city of 40,000 or so, and just look at it. State College really is dominated by Penn State, which has like 45,000 students, so a transient population larger than the city itself, plus 25,000 university staff, so you'd have to give some thought to whether you want to live in a city like that, but there's no doubt it's super walkable with a ton to offer, so why not? I mean, instead of college being a version of simulated urbanism that you only experience for a couple years, and then you move on to an unhealthy, climate-damaging, car-dependent lifestyle, you could just, choose to live in a college town. I mean, it's probably the next best thing, since I don't think anyone's gonna let you live at like Disney World. Or you could just do what I did and live in Vegas, which I don't anymore, but I am going back to visit soon because, and I know this makes me a weirdo, but I really enjoy Vegas. I'm just fascinated with the way it's constantly tearing itself down and building itself back up to try to adapt to changing consumer tastes. It's kind of an exaggerated version of what all US cities do, and if that idea resonates, I've got a content recommendation, which is Lindsay Ellis's The Life and Death of Family-Friendly Las Vegas. Lindsay's stuff is always hilarious and culturally insightful, things I do personally aspire to on my channel. But also, it's well researched, and even though I think of myself as a bit of a student of Vegas history, there's stuff in here even I didn't know. Like, at one point in the 90s, there was actually a plan afoot to build a life-size replica of the Starship Enterprise downtown. Why can't we have nice things? The Life and Death of Family-Friendly Las Vegas from Lindsay Ellis is a Nebula original, and it's another great example of Nebula creators being able to approach topics with a little more edge than you might be able to get away with on the usual video sharing website. And remember, Nebula is a platform that's owned by us, the creators, so when you sign up, you're helping us grow a platform that, by its very nature, supports all of us in a long-term structural way, financially, professionally, and creatively. So if you want to support this channel's ability to continue to grow and reach more people, signing up for Nebula is a great way to do that. But mainly, sign up because of the great content. Your Nebula subscription does include classes too for all you lifelong learners out there. And a new one I got a lot out of was how to make a real-time history video from real-time history. I'm always trying to get better at different aspects of what I do, and there's all kinds of great stuff in here about research, storyboarding, and just overall storytelling, and this is honestly not specific to making video content. Understanding how to deliver information in a way that keeps people engaged is super important in all kinds of contexts and professions. So if you sign up for Nebula using my custom link down in the description, you will get all the Nebula content, including classes, for just $250 a month, which is 40% off the usual price. It is an incredible value, and you'll be supporting this channel in a way that really makes a difference. And if you were watching on Nebula, you'd be watching a version of this video that does not have a Nebula promo in it. Just throwing that out there. And that's all I've got. Thanks for joining, and thanks as always to the patrons who keep this channel running like the fine-tuned machine it is. If you disagree with this list or how I pulled the data together, or if you just want to give your favorite college town a shout out, just drop it down in the comments. Keep the great topic suggestions coming. I'll be back with a new episode next week, and I'll see you then.